pause for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks, and the House is not in order.
Gentleman is correct. The House is not in order. Members, please take your conversations off the floor. Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize National Intern Day, celebrated this year on July 30th. This day is dedicated to recognizing and celebrating the future leaders of the world, interns. This day serves as an opportunity for thousands of employers to commemorate and thank their hardworking interns. And I'd like to take this time to recognize and thank the interns who joined me this summer, both in my personal office and on the Agriculture Committee. Chloe, a Pennsylvanian descendant of dairy farmers, worked in my personal office and was instrumental in helping the people of Pennsylvania's 15th Congressional District. Jimmy, Caitlin, Harper, Raymond, and Madison supported the agriculture staff through dozens of hearings, roundtables, and other committee events as we work on behalf of farmers and ranchers across all 50 states. From leading tours, helping constituents, drafting speeches, and attending briefings, these interns were a fantastic addition to my offices this summer. Mr. Speaker, our interns are some of the best and brightest across our nation, and they should be proud of all that they've accomplished this summer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California, from Michigan? For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
I have unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the upcoming opening of the Gori Ha Bridge. It's a bridge that I see every day from my home. I live on the riverfront, on beautiful riverfront in Detroit, Michigan. The bridge, located in the heart of Michigan's 13th Congressional District and built by thousands of Michigan workers, the bridge is a critical economic link between the United States and Canada. Canada is one of our greatest allies and the largest international buyer of Michigan products and goods. The Gordie Howe Bridge means more Michigan jobs, increased U.S.-Canada commerce, faster travel times, and lower toll costs. I am grateful to all the partners in Michigan, the United States, and Canada who are working hard to make this bridge a reality. I urge the Trump administration to facilitate the opening of this bridge without further delay. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Chief Heath Helton of the Little Rock Police Department for his 3 decades of public service to our capital city, and to congratulate him on his recent appointment as the Director of Arkansas's Division of Law Enforcement Standards and Training. As Chief, Helton implemented the city's comprehensive crime reduction strategy, lending to 4 consecutive years of falling crime. Violent crime has declined by 15% under his tenure. Chief Helton is an inspired choice to now help shape the law enforcement training standards for Arkansas. His proven leadership will serve Arkansas well as he trains that next generation of officers. I join all Central Arkansans in thanking Chief Helton for his service, and I wish him continued success as he works to make Arkansas a safe place to live, work, and raise a family. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor Alan Slater, whose 35 years of leadership have strengthened the Orange County Superior Court and promoted justice. As Superior Court Executive Officer, Alan prioritized the well-being of those who are too often overlooked by our justice system. Under his direction, partnerships with community groups and leaders created a bona fide safety net of legal aid and social services, ensuring all residents were able to access due process. As a visionary in court technology, Allen pioneered statewide models that expanded access to restraining orders, improved officer safety, and advanced transparency through open access to court records. His service reflects a deep commitment to public accountability and to good service to all people. And today, I ask my colleagues to reflect on how local leaders like Alan Slater strengthen our institutions and protect the rights of those who are most in need. Thank you, Alan. Mr. Speaker, I yield.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from South Carolina seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, every day law enforcement officers across this country put on the badge, putting their lives on the line. Anderson County Sheriff's Deputy Alex Albrecht experienced that reality firsthand. During what began as a routine traffic stop with another officer, Deputy Albrecht responded to his call for backup and was shot in the line of duty while serving his community. By the grace of God, he survived, has recovered from his injuries, and continues to embody the courage and resilience that define America's law enforcement officers. Deputy Albrecht's story reminds us that there is no such thing as a routine day in law enforcement. Every traffic stop, every call for service, and every shift carries risk. Yet our deputies and police officers answered that call regardless, putting others before themselves. For the people across South Carolina, men and women like Deputy Albrecht represent the very best of public service. May God continue to bless Deputy Albrecht, his family, and every law enforcement officer who faithfully serves our communities. And I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor Debbie Espinosa, President and CEO of Fine Food Bank, and her 8 years of extraordinary leadership. Debbie and I have stood together through disaster response, through the darkest days of the pandemic, and in the fight to protect the federal nutrition programs that many children and farm worker families depend on. When I served as chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, I invited Debbie to Washington to brief my colleagues on the unique food security challenges facing farm workers in our valley because their story deserved to be heard on the national stage. She has also been a trusted partner to my office, helping provide food assistance to federal employees and families during shutdowns and supporting community conversations on food insecurity. Debbie never just simply distributed food. She built bridges, connecting federal resources to local solutions and ensuring no family in our district went without in moments of emergency or everyday hardship. As she moves on to lead harvesters, serving 27 counties across Missouri and Kansas, our valley's loss becomes a nation's gain. Debbie, thank you for your partnership, your compassion, and your unwavering commitment to the people in the Coachella Valley region and for our friendship. We are forever grateful. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
Consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize Mr. Cary Grant for his remarkable testimony of faith and unwavering determination. This past Sunday, Cary preached his first sermon in American Sign Language at Deaf Michiana Mission Church in South Bend, Indiana, nearly 8 years after losing his ability to speak because of a neurological disease. After delivering his final verbal sermon on July 22, 2018, many thought this was his opportunity to preach had come to an end. Instead, through faith, perseverance, and learning American Sign Language, Cary found a new way to continue sharing the gospel. A regular attendee of Grace Bible Church, where his son Kyle Grant pastors, Kerry has inspired his community through his resilience and steadfast trust in the Lord. His journey reminds us that challenges can become opportunities to glorify God and serve others. Kerry, congratulations on this incredible milestone. You've been such an inspiration as you return to preaching God's holy word. I wish you God's continued blessings as you continue sharing his message. I'll yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Oregon seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, 57 years ago this week, the world watched as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin first stepped foot on the moon. That historic achievement was thanks to American innovation and engineering breakthroughs, and it showed what is possible when we dream beyond the stars. Now, 57 years later, we're preparing for our return to the moon. Through NASA's Artemis program, the U.S. will once again set foot on the moon, opening the door for the next era of space exploration. But missions like Artemis would not be possible without the skilled technical workers, scientists, and innovators whose talent turns bold ideas into reality. If America is to remain the world's scientific leader, we must continue investing in the programs and inspiring the next generation of students who make these missions possible. That's why I urge my colleagues to pass my resolution that would recognize July 20th, the day astronauts first landed on the moon, as Moon Day. I'll keep working to support policies that get us one small step closer to the next giant leap for mankind. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and advising some of my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of Montgomery County Deputy Erica Serrato, who was killed in the line of duty this year on June 28th. With 6 years of service protecting our community, she began her career at just 18 years old as a detention officer and ascended the ranks to deputy sheriff earlier this year. Erica lived a life of service and embodied the values of courage, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to protecting others. On behalf of the Texas 8th Congressional District, I'm grateful for all that Erica did to protect the citizens of Montgomery County. And as our community grapples with the immeasurable loss, my prayers are with the family, friends, and the entire Montgomery County Sheriff's Office during this difficult time. May she rest in peace. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of Carl Kanasik, a devoted Arizonan who passed away this week at the age of 94. Carl, an Air Force veteran, came to Arizona in 1959. He opened a pharmacy in Mesa, and when his families couldn't afford medicine for a sick child, he let them sign the book and he would have them pay him later. To the people who lived there, he was a hero. That same spirit carried him into public service. He served in the Arizona House, the Senate, and on the Corporation Commission. He helped design Access, our state's Medicaid program, finding a made-in-Arizona solution to make sure lower-income families could get the care they needed. As Senate President, he presided over the difficult impeachment trial of a governor of his own party. He did not want that duty, but he believed the Constitution left him no choice, and he did it with fairness. It cost him his seat, but he did it anyway. Carl Kanasik did not see party first, he saw people. We would do well to remember his example. My thoughts are with his wife Karen and his children, both of whom followed him into public service actions. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Iowa seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to your combat service, my combat service, but most importantly, the combat service of those currently on the front line. As a 20-year veteran of the U.S. Air Force and a colonel, I respect America's strength and that it starts at home. The National Defense Authorization Act of 2027 has been delivered in a bipartisan way, and I'm proud to share that yesterday the NDAA passed with 8 of my amendments, one of the most of any member of Congress, and in a bipartisan fashion, including enhancing our Air National Guard capabilities, countering Chinese aggression, rebuilding our defense arsenal, supporting our service members' health and pay, and support increases for our veterans and our members. However, I'm most proud of my Amendment 930, which directs the Air Force to identify bases that already have runways and technical expertise to support the next generation of aircraft, but currently lack a permanent flying mission. The 132nd Fighter Wing in Des Moines is a perfect example. The 132nd has a proud history as the premier flying unit in our nation's history for F-16s, both training and operational. Together, the F-16 and the 132nd have built a world-class drone, cyber, and intelligence operation mission while still having access to a fully operational runway. This gives the 132nd a rare winning combination of top-tier expertise, a secure facility, and an active runway. I want to thank all my friends at the Iowa Air National Guard, and I yield the remainder of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to rise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to celebrate the remarkable life of the Aretha Branch of LaGrange, LA, North Carolina, who recently celebrated her 100th birthday. She's lived a life defined by faith, service, and a steadfast commitment to her community. As a social worker, educator, business owner, and civic leader, she broke barriers, including becoming the first African-American member of the Board of Trustees at UNC Health Lenoir. Through decades of volunteer service and leadership, she strengthened lives and opened doors for others. I wish Aretha Branch a joyful 100th birthday and thank her for a century of faith, love, and service that continues to inspire Eastern North Carolina and our nation. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Mississippi seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the outstanding men and women of the United States Coast Guard Port Security Unit 308, proudly headquartered in Pascagoula, Mississippi, for receiving the Rear Admiral Bennett Bud Sparks Award, one of the highest honors bestowed upon the Coast Guard Reserve Unit. This prestigious award recognizes excellence in operational readiness, reserve integration, and mission performance, and PSU 308 has more than earned this distinction. Over the past year, these citizen service members supported critical missions across the Indo-Pacific, became the first Coast Guard Reserve unit to execute back-to-back embarked security deployments aboard military Sea Lift command vessels, and deployed within 48 hours to help secure our nation's southern maritime border during Operation River Wall. We also conducted hundreds of patrols while maintaining an excellent reserve readiness rate of nearly 97%. These achievements reflect the professionalism, discipline, and unwavering commitment of the men and women who balance civilian careers and with answering our nation's call whenever duty requires. As chairman of the Coast Guard Maritime Transportation Subcommittee, I know firsthand the vital role our Coast Guard plays in protecting America's maritime interest. The members of PSU 308 embody the Coast Guard motto, Semper Paratus, always ready. To the service members of Port Security Unit 308 and their families, thank you for your sacrifice, your dedication, and your faithful service to our nation. Mississippi is proud of you, and so is the United States of America. And Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise today to honor the life of my constituent, Jack Permy. I first met Jack several years ago in Westchester, where he was volunteering to help bring clean water to people in need, and that generosity would come to define his life. Jack began experiencing symptoms of spinocerebellar ataxia as a child. This progressive neurodegenerative disease impaired his coordination, his balance, and his speech, and his ability to swallow, and it ultimately took his life at just 28 years old. As the ataxia progressed, Jack had to give up driving and the many hobbies that he loved, including blacksmithing and woodworking and 3D modeling. But when Jack discovered that he could ride a recumbent bike, he regained a sense of freedom and independence and immediately set out to share it. In 2024, Jack founded Moving Forward for Ataxia, and he rode thousands of miles, raised more than $55,000, and provided 17 recumbent bikes to people across the country. My heart is with Jack's parents, Monica and David, his stepmother, Leslie, his siblings, Grant and Ricky, and everyone who loved him and was touched by his bravery and his generosity. Jack's message to all of us was very simple. Build connections, be kind, and whatever you do, whatever you face, keep moving forward. And that's exactly what his legacy will help others to do. Thank you, and I yield.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from the Northern Mariana Islands seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the Association of Pacific Ports and its more than a century of advancing maritime commerce, cooperation, and security across the Pacific. For Guam and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, our ports are lifelines. They connect our islands to the world and ensure our communities receive the food, fuel, medicine, and supplies we depend on every day. Before coming to Congress, I had the privilege of serving as the chairperson of the Commonwealth Ports Authority and later as the president of the Association of Pacific Ports. I saw firsthand how collaboration among Pacific ports strengthen our economies, improves resilience, and supports our shared future. As our nation increases its focus on the Indo-Pacific, Pacific ports play an increasingly vital role in both economic prosperity and national security. This August, the association will hold its 112th conference in Guam under the theme, Inafamaulik, Strengthening Our Shared Pacific, reflecting the enduring value of partnership and mutual respect. Mr. Speaker, I ask my colleagues to join me in recognizing the Association of Pacific Ports for its outstanding service and to congratulate its members and this important milestone. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Free Jakob Era Vahandre now. ICE arrested and detained him for exercising his First Amendment rights. They targeted him for speaking out against genocide and standing up for political prisoners. Jakob is a photojournalist who has lived in the United States for 25 years as a dreamer, as a DACA recipient. He is a first responder and spent a decade working for American Airlines, serving on their care team that supported families following plane crashes. When the helicopter crashed into a plane in D.C., right here, Jakob was there to support grieving families. When Texas experienced the deadliest flood in recent history, Jakob volunteered to bring emergency aid to victims. Now it's our turn to be there for Jakob. They are trying to deport him over liking social media posts. Why? Because he wants to save lives no matter faith or ethnicity. This should frighten all of us. The Trump administration is terrorizing immigrants who disagree with them and targeting political dissent in our country. We must speak out. We must free Jakob now. I yield.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to salute the 50th anniversary celebration of an institution in my home community of Rye, Kelly's Sea Level. It's a big shindig is planned for the month of August, a little later on, at this iconic restaurant and bar that has welcomed locals and visitors since 1976. Mary and Martha and their kids are beloved in the community, and they are at Kelly's most every night with their neighbors and friends, watching TV sports, the Yankees, Giants, Rangers, Knicks, even the Mets. And they also are outdoor in the fall to watch the Rye Garnets high school football games. Visiting Kelly's is to be at home for the long-term locals from Rye, Harrison, Port Chester, Greenwich, the financiers, the college kids home for the holidays, hardworking firefighters, and the occasional congressman. They all come to Kelly's each week. We know that the menu, the bartenders, the waitstaff, and all those little things that the locals know, like the two-seat table in the back known as the Oak Room. It is Jerry and Martha that give Kelly's its heart and soul, and we all are amazed that we've reached 50 years. From the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives, we salute the McGuire family and Kelly's Sea Level on its 50th year of serving the thirsty and hungry people of Rye and the surrounding communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This coming Monday morning, July 27th, in the heart of the largest freshwater endowment on Earth, the Great Lakes, the iconic $6 billion Gordie Howe Bridge between Windsor, Ontario, and Detroit, Michigan, will officially open. This magnificent suspension bridge, built totally with Canadian financing coupled with the might of American union muscle, will usher in a new horizon for our international and connected economies and freshwater kingdom. This achievement will lift up our industrial and agricultural nations to new possibilities. As with President Dwight D. Eisenhower's visionary construction of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway following World War II that connected our distant heartland region to the Atlantic Ocean through Canada, this singularly masterful achievement will propel economic growth in long-neglected corridors as multi-transport by rail, air, sea, and land are reimagined and joined. I implore the President of our country and his coastal advisors to see the Great Lakes nation as a long-ignored bastion. Don't put more tariffs on us. Help us build our economy forward in the most sustainable region on planet Earth. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of SEIU FPSU President Alfonso Mayfield, a beloved labor leader and tireless champion for working people across the state of Florida and across the South. Alfonso was a young black labor leader from the South that understood that the struggles of working-class families and dedicated his life to advancing economic and social justice. For more than 25 years with the SEIU, including serving as president since 2010, he fought tirelessly for union members, securing important victories and inspiring countless workers to stand together in solidarity. He understood that the true power of our communities rests in the hands of working people united with a common purpose. Alfonso led with love, and an unwavering commitment rests in the hands of working people. As we mourn his loss, we must also honor his legacy by continuing the work that he dedicated his life to. My deep condolences to his family and all those that were touched by his leadership. May his memory continue to be a blessing, and may his vision continue to guide us forward. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the data is in, and Trump and Republicans' big ugly law has been disastrous for Americans. We can now confirm that they have succeeded in ripping food assistance away from 4.5 million SNAP recipients, including 1.5 million children. In Rhode Island alone, that's over 16,000 people who are now heading to the grocery store with less to spend as costs rise because of Trump's tariffs and illegal wars. Across my district, I've spoken with food pantry leaders seeing rising demand. I've heard from Rhode Islanders struggling to feed a family on $90 a month in SNAP benefits. And in the wealthiest country in the world, no one should have to worry about putting food on the table. We can do better than Trump's foreign wars and putting billionaires over the welfare of working people. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Massachusetts seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today on behalf of my family, my husband Conan, our daughter Cora, and the City of Boston and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to honor the life of Pastor Byron Christopher Sumner, a beloved son of Roxbury. Chris deserved to grow old, but he transitioned on July 5th due to complications from ALS. He excelled from a young age at athletics, particularly basketball, which brought him to Canada, where he earned scholarships and eventually played semi-pro. But his commitment, talent, agility, and strength went beyond the court. He returned to Boston, where he devoted his career to serving his community as executive director of the I Have a Dream program, Blue Hill Boys and Girls Club, Boston 10-Point Coalition, and St. Stephen's Youth programs. His final role was an appointment from Governor Healy as executive director of the Melnia Cass Recreation Center, what he often called his dream job. But Chris's true passion was his family and his faith. I've said so often, I would rather see a sermon than hear one any day. And Chris was a sermon, the best kind. He married his wife, Katani, in 1985, and they raised 3 beautiful children, Candace, Courtney, and Christian. He also faithfully served as executive director, executive pastor of Jubilee Christian Church, supporting our community with spiritual covering, stewardship, and most of all, joy. As we grieve his loss, may we move forward in service of our children, young adults, families, and elders, or as Chris would say, our city's treasured assets. May he rest peacefully in eternal rest. I yield.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Mexico seek recognition?
Consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, happy Disability Pride Month. Originating in the passage of the Americans with Disability Act, this month and every month, we celebrate the strength, resilience, and leadership of New Mexicans living with disabilities in our state and across the country. They have fought for accessible schools, reliable transportation, inclusive workplaces, and the freedom to live with dignity, self-determination, and joy. We thank our leaders, advocates, and communities for your work. And to every New Mexican living with a disability, your voice, your advocacy, and your leadership matters. You belong in every classroom, every workplace, every community, and at every seat at every table. And we will continue to fight and celebrate alongside you, not just this month, but every month, to build a New Mexico and a world where every person can live with dignity, independence, and pride. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1
Thank
minute.
you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor the life and the legacy of Bishop McKinley B. Johnson, who passed away last week after 7 decades of service to the Albany community as a faith leader and a powerful moral conscience. As his family said last week, Bishop Johnson always believed that, and I quote, "The work of the gospel and the work of justice were never separate errands," close quote. And through every step of his long and transformative career, Bishop Johnson personified these powerful ideals of justice and faith. From the pulpit of the Greater St. John's Church of God in Christ in Albany's South End, Bishop Johnson never hesitated to speak truth to power. Time after time, he and his wife Sue advocated fiercely for their beloved community and stood at the forefront of decades of struggles for civil rights and equality. So while I join Bishop Johnson's many loved ones in mourning this tremendous loss for our community, I also know that his legacy will live on forever in the battles he fought, the changes he spurred, and the people he inspired. May his memory continue to be a blessing. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Oregon seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise today to share that Oregon State University has received one of 12 National Science Foundation's regional innovation engines. This investment in Oregon's semiconductor industry will strengthen educational partnerships across the state, meaningfully influence regional economic development, improve pathways to semiconductor careers, and create thousands of new, high-paying, high-tech jobs outside the Portland metro area. Oregon could receive up to $160 million to grow the state's semiconductor industry that already employs 30,000 Oregonians. Oregon's FAST Coalition brings together state partners across educational government, the technology industry, nonprofits, small businesses, and investors. It will also bring our innovation corridor closer together across 12 counties and foster innovation. Demand for semiconductors is rising, and the NSF Fast Engine will help Oregon State University design the world's most advanced semiconductor chips and reaffirm our position as leaders in that space. Go Beeps! Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize the life and service of Sue Rainey, a remarkable public servant in the San Francisco Bay Area. Sue served as the mayor of Moraga, California in the late 1970s, and later as the mayor of Walnut Creek, California from 2001 to 2010, where she worked diligently to develop that city into the business, retail, arts hub that it is today. She also volunteered with the cancer support community in the San Francisco Bay Area for over 20 years, ultimately serving as the board chair of the San Francisco Bay Area chapter. Thanks to her leadership in the cancer community, the chapter now supports over 100 families each year. Sadly, Sue passed away last month at the age of 86, a remarkable life of 86 years. She will be fondly remembered for her commitment to our community, for bettering the lives of thousands of people. Please join me in honoring the life and service of my friend, Sue Rainey. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to once again demand that ICE immediately provide my constituent, Carlitos Ricardo Parias, urgently needed medical care. Carlitos is a father, a husband, a volunteer in our community who was even recognized by City Council for his service. Last October, ICE shot Carlitos near his elbow. He received initial care at a hospital, but since being transferred to the Adelanto ICE facility in December, ICE has denied him proper care for the injury they caused. I visited Carlitos in late May. His hand was purple, his fingers were atrophied, he is experiencing headaches and nerve pain. I am worried that he may have a bone infection and that his arm could be amputated. Carlitos urgently needs medical attention, and many more at Adelanto do too. Last week, a federal judge ordered sweeping changes to improve Adelanto's conditions for detainees. It is time for ICE to comply with this judge's orders and end this cruelty at Adelanto and nationwide.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
With that, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the legacy of Detective Luis Alvarez and the advancement of a bill to rename his hometown post office in Oceanside in his honor. Detective Alvarez was a true American hero and bravely answered the call on 9/11 after the worst terror attack on American soil. He spent months searching for survivors among the toxic rubble at Ground Zero, and as a result of his exposure, received a cancer diagnosis in 2016. He continued his legacy of service and became a leading advocate for 9/11 first responders, famously appearing before Congress in 2019 to fight for the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund. Detective Alvarez represents the best of us, and we must ensure that his heroism and sacrifice are never forgotten. I'm proud to say that my bill to rename the Oceanside Post Office is supported by the Alvarez family and the entire New York House delegation. Now I'm urging the Speaker to act quickly and bring the legislation to the floor to honor Detective Alvarez ahead of the 9/11 25th anniversary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Maryland seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, as families across Maryland's 6th Congressional District prepare for a new school year, they're facing yet another hit to their wallets. Parents will be spending an average of $485 extra per child on back-to-school costs, nearly 12% more than last year. I'm a mom of 4 daughters, and I've lived through various stages of raising a family, buying backpacks, new sports shoes, equipment, and back-to-school supplies, even getting them off to college. Today, my youngest will be at college, and I know that these costs continue after high school, including how many families are struggling with affordability of college and career and technical training. Families shouldn't have to struggle to choose between paying for childcare and school supplies. That's why I launched a cost-down agenda to focus on new ways to address accessible daycare, fortify the child income tax credit, further food co-ops, prohibit algorithmic pricing of consumer goods and groceries, and end nonsensical tariffs which drive up costs. In Maryland, we leave no one behind, and we shouldn't in Congress either. Team Maryland is working at federal, state, and local levels to mitigate costs and address these costs, and we need to do it in Congress as well. We need partnership
The
to
gentlewoman's
support
time has
working
expired.
families. With that, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate Amy Reardon on her selection as the 2027 Region 3 Teacher of the Year. This prestigious award honors teachers who represent the very best in education across the Commonwealth of Virginia and recognizes the extraordinary impact they have on their students, schools, and communities. An English language teacher at Chancellor Elementary School in Spotsylvania County, Amy has dedicated 2 decades to serving students in Spotsylvania County schools. This includes 13 years as a first-grade teacher at Battlefield Elementary School. Throughout her career, she has demonstrated an unwavering commitment to academic excellence, fostering inclusive classrooms where every student is encouraged to succeed. Her passion for supporting multilingual learners has helped countless students build confidence, develop their skills, and reach their full potential. I congratulate Amy Reardon on this well-deserved recognition and thank her for the lasting difference she continues to make in the lives of Virginia's students. I yield back.
The chair announces the Speaker's appointment pursuant to Section 4A of House Resolution 5, 119th Congress, and the order of the House of January 3, 2025, of the following member to the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party.
Mr. Suozzi of New York.
The chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., July 23, 2026. I hereby designate the period from Thursday, July 23, 2026, through Sunday, August 30, 2026, as a district work period under Clause 13 of Rule 1. Signed sincerely, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3, 2025, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and still I rise, and I rise today as I always do, censured but not silenced. Censured but not silenced. A very proud, unbought, unbossed, liberated, unelected Democrat. And I rise today to bring 2 things to the attention of the House and to the people of the United States of America. The first is a brief update on ICE, and the second is an explanation related to crypto-crony capitalism. Crypto-crony capitalism. Let us begin. With reference to ICE, friends, we had a briefing just yesterday, and at that briefing, some things were discovered, other things were uncovered. We found, of course, what we knew, and that is that there was not a body camera on the ICE officers who took the life of Mr. Lorenzo Salgado Araujo. The officers did not have body cameras on, and there was not a dash camera in the vehicle. The video that we have seen was taken by some public device, And that video, of course, has given us reason to understand that Mr. Salgado Araujo was not committing what I perceive as an infraction related to the law. He was not. The evidence that we heard yesterday gave us good reason to believe that there will be body cameras, and these body cameras will be in place on all officers who are performing this type of activity where they are taking people into custody or desire to take people into custody for various reasons associated with immigration, that these officers will all have body cameras. And I brought up the question of dash cameras, and they indicated to me that that would be given consideration. So I'm very proud that the persons that were available indicated that they would not only give us the body cameras in 60 days, but they would also consider dash cameras in the vehicle itself. I think these things will help not only the public, but also the officers, because the officers can immediately have the evidence to exonerate themselves when there is some question as to whether or not the officers have committed an infraction of the law. So I'm very proud to know that these things will happen. But there will be a follow-up to make sure that they do happen. I'm also proud to tell you that on tomorrow, there will be in Houston, Texas, a forum wherein we will have an opportunity to have a discussion about these issues associated with Mr. Lorenzo Salgado Araujo's death. We'll have an opportunity to ask questions of people who can give us more information. These things are important. But finally, on this question of ICE, I would only make this point, that we will get the body cameras. I believe we will get the dash cameras in time. But here's what I know. I know that we will have them because lives were lost. And I regret that it has taken the loss of lives, to have us do what ICE should have been asking us to do. We should not have been asking that these things be done. One would think that the officers would say, these body cameras are going to benefit us. Would you please, Congress, give us body cameras? Not the case. And because it was not the case, and because Mr. Preddy lost his life, and Ms. Good lost her life, and Mr. Salgado Araujo lost his life, and we had a person in Maine to lose his life. These four persons, all of these things occurring within this year, these things, these issues, these persons losing their lives will now give us the opportunity to have body cameras. It is a disgrace, a shame, and a sin to have to conclude that lives have to be lost for us to do the right thing. I want the world to know that I will never, ever stop the challenge that's before us to make sure that ICE is an institution, as it were, an organization, if you will, that will treat people fairly and justly. Not all of the ICE officers are engaged in illegal activities, and some of the activities are illegal when you engage in extrajudicial killings. But not all of the officers are doing this. So I'm not painting everybody with the same brush. But I am saying enough of them are doing it for us to demand some additional reforms with ICE. And of course, we're still demanding that they have uniforms that are indicative of the work that they do, that their names be displayed on those uniforms, that they not enter property without a proper warrant, the things that we would just take for granted that the Constitution would afford us and would be recognized by officers of the law. So I promise you, I'm going to stay in this fight, and we're going to get positive results. Now, moving on to the crony crypto capitalism. For those who do not know, the president has a meme coin, and the president's meme coin has done quite well. The president's meme coin, the $ Trump meme coin, that meme coin has made $1.74 million per day over a one-year period of time. $1.74 million per day over a one-year period of time. Over that same one-year period of time, nearly 1 million people lost $3.8 billion. Let me repeat that. Over that same period of time, nearly 1 million people lost $3.8 billion. How did this happen? It happened because the meme coin that the president has is a part of a Ponzi scheme. And a Ponzi scheme is a means by which a person can convince people that they should buy something that does not have any worth except for the purchase of that thing itself, which is nothing in this case. You purchase nothing with the belief that someone is willing to pay more for nothing than you've paid for nothing. And as a result, the value is increased for you if you paid nothing at a lower price than someone else is going to pay for this same thing called nothing. So the president has sold nothing to nearly 1 million people who lost $3.8 billion. $3.8 billion. President made $1.74 million per day on the deal. Pumped it up, took his $1.74 million per day, left nearly 1 million people to lose $3.8 billion. That, my friends, is the president's Ponzi scheme. One would ask, how can this be? It exists because we have a president who lives without the law by causing certain persons to believe that things should be legal that clearly have not been and should not be. Ponzi schemes have been illegal in this country. The president has managed to get his persons who are in charge to indicate that this is not illegal. This Ponzi scheme is not. Others still are. And I'm mentioning this to you because this scheme, this whole scam, is having an impact on capitalism. An impact on capitalism. There are people who are now starting to see this as a part of capitalism, the Ponzi scheme, a means of making money in what is called a free market. They believe that the free market is designed in certain places to benefit very wealthy people. They have breaks and benefits from capitalism by having laws passed to benefit them and by engaging in things such as this Ponzi scheme that benefit them. So in a sense, this is harming the concept of capitalism. And one should be able to understand why some people are looking at other options. If this is the way we're going to manage capitalism by having your cronies do quite well while millions of others are taken advantage of, this is one example of why people would say, maybe this is not working well enough and we'll try something else. Well, my hope is this. My hope is that we can correct these things, especially this thing associated with the president and his Ponzi scheme. My hope is that we can correct these things and let people see that truly we can have an economic order that treats people with the kind of justice that they deserve. This is an unjust system, the Ponzi scheme, and we have to bring justice to it. And probably the best way to bring justice to it is going to be to see this president walk away and then thereafter do some serious investigations, serious hearings, and get to the bottom of things not only associated with the Ponzi scheme, but other things as well. I regret that some people are not going to get their money back. My hope is that there would be some way to reverse it, but my belief is that a good many people are just going to suffer and will not get their money back. But I also know this, that as I'm speaking now, and I'm telling people this is the case, the Ponzi scheme continues. The Ponzi scheme continues. People are going to buy into nothing and expect to get something. So you've been noticed. Please understand that the president's just taking advantage of you. He is. And not only is he doing it in this area, there are many others. I'm just talking about this today. I'll talk about others at a later time. But he's taking advantage of you. And you can stop it by not buying into this Ponzi scheme. Capitalism is taking a hit, and if it's because of many reasons, but the chief reason, I think, being the president who is doing things to aid and abet his friends, allowing people to make contributions and then have certain benefits. A president who clearly has lived beneath the law and above the law. Beneath it in the sense that he doesn't believe that it exists, so he pushes it aside, and above it in the sense that he doesn't get charged for his criminality the same way other people would be charged if they were doing similar things. My belief is that we have time to cure some of the harm, but time is not on our side because every day the president continues to find new ways to take advantage of the economic order that has been in place in this country since its inception for the most part. So I would only say to you this: one of the remedies that we have available to us is one that I will pursue. I said we needed to wait until we could get control of the House and the Senate and the presidency, yes. But people want to know, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? And I have said, and I continue to say, that we are in a countdown to impeachment. My desire will be to do this. When next we are in session, for all to know, articles of impeachment will be filed. The countdown will continue, but it will become that which will be brought to the floor of the House of Representatives when next we are in session. When next the House of Representatives is in session, I will take the articles over to the clerk. They will be filed. And at some time thereafter, a reasonable amount of time thereafter, to give members a chance to see exactly what I filed, although I plan to publish the articles before they are filed so that people will know what we're going to file. File these articles of impeachment. That'll give them plenty of time to prepare the defense of, well, it's too soon. The Senate won't take up the articles seriously. The Senate won't. You don't have enough senators there to convict. Let's see, what else will people say? Always, whatever it is not impeachable until maybe they decide that they want to file articles, and then it becomes an impeachable offense. But let's be reminded of what President Ford said. An impeachable offense, meaning impeachment, is whatever a given Congress says at a given time. Whatever a given Congress says at a given time. It is not appealable. It is not something that will require you to report how you came to your conclusions. Really, it's a matter of conscience for me, and I hope for others as well. So we will file the articles of impeachment. We will notice them prior to them being filed. People can start preparing now your arguments for why you can't support the articles of impeachment. But here's what I do know. Posterity is not going to look favorably upon us for allowing a president to commit impeachable offenses and do nothing. Of course, someone would say, but we will do something when we're in the majority. Now, that's another interesting question as I close. I've been out on the campaign trail, and I hear the people talking about all of these things that they're going to do when they get to Congress. Well, I've seen at least one example of the person getting to Congress and concluding, I'll be doing something next year when we have the majority. Run on doing something great now, but get here and realize that you don't have the power to do what you thought, so you'll do it next year. Well, I'm going to do things now. I'm not going to wait until next year. I'm a right now kind of guy, and as a right now kind of person, I will bring the articles of impeachment. This is what the Constitution requires. It is what I will do because, again, I am an unbought, unbossed, unafraid, unelected, liberated Democrat. I yield back.
Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the president. Pursuant to Clause 13 of Rule 1, the House stands adjourned until 9:30 a.m. on Monday, July 27th, 2026.